And now for our final presentation for the evening. Each of these individuals is so extraordinary, but each of them has one thing in common. No, not public school teachers and volunteer firefighters for everybody, but each of them is making the world better. And that is also true for our last honoree for the evening, Dean L. Winslow. Dean. Dean L. Winslow, a graduate of the Eberly College of Science, currently is a professor of medicine at Stanford University. Dr. Winslow has also had a 35-year military career, rising to the rank of colonel in the U.S. Air Force. He's a highly decorated veteran whose service included coordinating military public health in Louisiana in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, and serving as an ER physician at the U.S. Air Force Combat Hospital in Baghdad during military operations in Iraq. Dr. Winslow also has a truly stellar academic career. This is what professors do. I actually Googled and looked him up. It's incredible. Published scholar with dozens of peer-reviewed publications, as a scientific developer of new technology to identify HIV virus, and as director of clinical research for a leading pharmaceutical company. I think if there's one hallmark of Dr. Winslow's career, it is this: he believes in helping others. Shortly after the COVID-19 pandemic began, he volunteered his time and his expertise at the Centers for Disease Control. He was appointed director of the COVID-19 Testing and Diagnostics Working Group, which was a $46 billion endeavor to track the virus and end the pandemic. Early in his career, he established the first HIV clinic in Delaware, and he arranged medical care for Iraqi children with complex medical conditions. Dr. Winslow and his wife, Dr. Julie Parsonette, created the Eagle Fund of the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, which provides aid to Middle Eastern and Central American refugees. And in 2018, he co-founded SAFE, Scrubs Addressing the Firearms Epidemic, an organization that strives to unite healthcare professionals to address gun violence. In the words of one of his colleagues, there can be no question at all about his contributions to medicine, to science, to our country, and to the fabric of our communities. It is with great pride, Dean, that we induct you and give you this Alumni Fellow Award. Truly, thank you.
Thank you so much, President Neely, and thank you, Dean Landkill, also for nominating me for this lovely award. I also wanted to thank my baby sister, Dr. Alex Mafili, who is 16 years younger than me, graduated class of 91, and her husband, Eugene, who thinks class of 89. He's also an Air Force veteran and runs our Veterans Center here. So, thank you all so much for your support. Anyway, first of all, I always, when I introduce myself to the new residents and medical students, I always make sure they know that Dean is just my first name. It's not a title. But anyway, so I just thought I would tell you a few very funny stories. So I grew up and went to high school in Dover, Delaware, not too far from here. And there was a checkbox where you could, if you applied to Penn State, you could also apply to the Penn State Jefferson 5-year cooperative program, which was basically taking you from high school to being a graduate of Jefferson Medical College in 5 years. And it was pretty intense. I graduated from high, well, the bottom line was I got accepted for it. I just couldn't believe it because I played varsity football in high school, and I got hit on the head a lot. And I'm still convinced that if I hadn't played football, I would have had at least 300 more points on my SATs. And I found out years later in like the late 1990s, when the Jefferson sent their alumni magazine out, they had this article about the history of the Penn State Jefferson program, and they had this one table. It had the lowest, highest, and the mean SAT scores, and I looked all up and down the table. I realized that I had the lowest SAT scores of anybody at that time in like the 40 years of the program. So it's actually something now I almost take perverse pride in, but. Anyway, so I arrived at Penn State, and I thought I would, could handle the academics pretty well. It was hard work, and I'm just so grateful, particularly for all the wonderful, biology and chemistry professors that I had, and because I had no trouble, when I actually went to Jefferson as a 19-year-old, a year and a half later, with my basic science classes. But I loved English literature and particularly poetry, and we actually, despite the intense science that we had to take, we actually had a fair number of electives that we could take, because again, we were here year round when we weren't at Jefferson. And my mom was an English teacher, public school teacher as well. Seems like a common theme. So I got an A in English too when I was here. So I qualified to take 300 and 400 level English classes. So I think it was in the spring term of 1972, and I signed up for English 410. It was British poetry of the 19th century, and I just loved it. And I participated in class. There were only like 15 people in the class, and almost all of them were English majors or graduate students. And I worked really hard, but our whole entire grade was based on one final paper. And I forget what I wrote about, but I was like so proud of this paper, and turned it in on time. And then the last day of class, the professor came up to me and he said, "Dean, I'd like to talk to you after class." And I thought he was going to say, you really knocked it out of the park. But anyway, he said, "Dean, I just want you to know, I read your paper last night, and if you had been an English major, this would be a C at best. But because you're the only science major that's taken my class in the 25 years I've been at Penn State, I'm going to give you a B+." So actually, I'm applying to do a sabbatical at University of Oxford, and I actually had to produce my Penn State transcript along with my Jefferson Medical College transcript. And I remember, looking at, English 410B, and I go, yeah. And I don't know if anyone here knows the author Tobias Wolff, who is also, a military veteran, and was a famous author, wrote the book A Boy's Life. And anyway, he's a friend of mine, and I told him that story, and he just cracked up laughing. So the other funny stories, and I don't want to go over, but so the thing actually, honestly, I'm most proud of my Penn State was that I was as a really not a very good football player. I only weighed 135 pounds, soaking wet, but I was really pretty fast and was, a reasonably good distance runner. And I had contacted Coach Harry Groves, who was the head track coach and cross-country coach here for almost 40 years. And, before, after I got accepted. And so anyway, so I started in June, and actually I worked out with kind of the summer track team, and he invited me to go to the cross-country camp. So actually I made the cross-country and the varsity track teams as a walk-on. So that's actually one of the things I'm more proud of than only my academic credentials was I made the varsity team at Penn State. And I kept in touch with Coach Groves, over the years. One of the funny stories, though, was so my mom and dad are both from the Midwest, and they're both, were Presbyterians, later became Episcopalians, but they never used bad language. I don't think my mom or dad ever said damn or hell more than once or twice the whole time I grew up. But when I came to Penn State, well, Coach Groves was kind of rough around the edges, and anyway, I was kind of shocked, that the language that he used, whereas he had a heart of gold, he really did. But anyway, it was 1998, so it was the 30th anniversary of his being made the head coach. And by the way, he'd served in the Army in the Korean War, then had been head coach at William and Mary before he was recruited at Penn State, came here in '68. So anyway, fast forward to '98, and they invited me to just say a few remarks. And so I mentioned that I was kind of shocked, when I heard the language coming out of Coach Groves. And I mentioned that, until I met Coach Groves, I didn't know that the F word could be used as a noun, a verb, an adjective, and an adverb. but anyway, so I did keep in touch with Coach, and then the last kind of funny story was this was about maybe 2016 or 2017. It was before COVID, and my wife, who'd never met Coach Groves, came up to State College to visit with Huge and Alex, and anyway, Coach had just recently moved from an apartment where he lived downtown into a retirement community, just a little bit farther down the street, and then Coach invited me to have. And Julie, my wife, to have breakfast with him. And so, we're talking and kind of laughing about the old days and everything. And then at one point, my wife asked Coach Gross, says, "Coach, what was Dean like in college?" And anyway, Coach said, "Well, he wasn't my fastest distance runner, but he raised the team GPA significantly." So anyway, thank you all very much for this award.